People continue to discover Lillian Smith, which is exciting. I think that's true of people who have something to say. You're going to be rediscovered, and you're going to continue to make a difference.
Lillian Smith was a controversial figure, but throughout the years she maintained the strength of her beliefs, being the first white woman in the South to write and speak openly against racism and segregation. In her acceptance speech for the Charles S. Johnson Award given by Fisk University in 1966, she summed up her lifelong convictions by saying, "Segregation is evil. There is no pattern of life which can dehumanize men as can the way of segregation."
I knew her just as a member of the family. We would come up to see her, but we would frequently stay, and then ultimately my father bought the big house down across 76, which was the first camp building.
Lillian Smith moved to Georgia when she was 15 and attended Piedmont College for 1 year.
Lillian Smith was a student here almost 100 years ago in 1916. And for many years, for as long as I've been at the college, which is 31 years now, I've heard about Lillian Smith. Lillian excelled in music, which is really quite interesting, although we know her today more as a writer and as a proponent of civil rights and social justice issues. She had quite a talent, particularly for playing the piano.
I mean, she talked about the quality of the instructors even back then, you know, this was 1915. And then she went to Peabody Conservatory, and that was the bulk of her education.
Lillian was a talented musician, a teacher, and spent many years as director of the Laurel Falls Camp for girls in Clayton, Georgia. During that time, Miss Smith had a profound influence on hundreds of young girls by encouraging honesty, kindness, and trust, in addition to physical and intellectual development.
Granddaddy had started it. Lil went to China for 3 years and was teaching music in a Methodist mission school. And Granddaddy wrote her and said, "You really need to come back and help me run this camp." And she did come back, not too willingly, but she was a dutiful daughter, and she came back. And after a while, it became pretty obvious that they had different ideas about what the camp should be. She had such a deep devotion to the arts and interest in the arts. So finally, he just said, "You take it." And so she bought it from him.
She traveled all over the world, and she did live outside of the South, but she kept her home in the South. She stayed there in Georgia, where she had not only taken the family business that she wasn't even initially really interested in doing, and made it into a very creative, progressive educational experiment.
Yes, I think that she observed some racism in China that was problematic, and it sort of sharpened her lens for seeing it in this country.
Coming up to see Miss Lil opened up a whole new world to me. I cannot describe. I can picture her coming down the stone steps out here in her pedal pushers. She was so welcoming to a 16-year-old.
There were several fires set, and then there were threatening letters that were written, but no one ever physically harmed her, although harm was threatened.
She was disarming when people met her because, one, she was not a very large person, and two, she spoke in a very soft, deep South voice, and she would speak quietly, but she would be saying these very radical things.
I had been fought, in the South. I had been smothered and censored simply because I was talking about something that was not the collective dream, not the official dream of the South.
Lillian Smith's writing career began with Pseudopodia, the small literary magazine she co-edited with Paula Snelling as an outlet for liberal writers, where she often contributed her own articles on race relations. She achieved national fame with the publication of Strange Fruit, which told the story of a love affair between a white boy and a black girl. The novel, banned in Boston as indecent, created a sensation in 1944. Nevertheless, the book was a bestseller and was dramatized by Lillian and her sister Esther for Broadway the next year.
To me, the word strange fruit, or the phrase, had nothing to do with lynching. I had used it before in an essay in which I had talked about what segregation had done to white culture. And I had said, we are the strange fruit of that way of life, we who are white.
in our bookcase at home, Strange Fruit, was wrapped in brown paper. And I think Miss Lil would have understood that. It was way ahead of where most people in this town were, both in terms of, sexual explicitness and the interracial love affair.
I know that I always knew that there were times when you didn't come and dropping into this room because Lil was busy, and busy usually meant writing. When you look at her biographical materials, and she and Paula started doing the little magazines, which started with Pseudopodia and then went to North Georgia Review. Then finally it was named South Today. They also published writings by black and white writers, which was quite novel at that time.
I have sensed in some of her writings that she wished she could just sit back and enjoy the arts or things like that a little more, but she had this obligation, really a personal mandate, to shatter segregation in all different forms. And she was even progressive in her definition of what constituted segregation. It was not just separation of blacks and whites, but separation from one's own psyche, or really one's sense of one's body.
All Miss Smith's writings reflect her views on racism and the narrow-mindedness of people in general. Her nonfiction work includes Killers of the Dream, Memory of a Large Christmas, and Now is the Time. Some of her best work put forth her ideas through fiction, such as The Journey, 1 Hour, and Our Faces, Our Words.
If you read Killers of the Dream, which is the nonfiction book that she always said was her most important book, it tells you about how she began as a child to see the inequities in life, growing up in a highly segregated Southern society, and it just didn't make sense. Not only that, there were certain incidents in her life that happened that broke her heart when she saw it. I don't think that passion ever dimmed, that passion for human justice. And so that colored a lot of her life and a lot of her writing.
Turns out that Killers of the Dream was the first place that I found that I felt like, now this is somebody who understands what it means to be white, to be female, to grow up in the racially segregated South, to understand not only how racism works, how it dehumanizes everyone involved. In Lillian Smith's words, it was what keeps you from developing and growing into being a full human being.
If I get in a bad spot in my life, I go pick up The Journey, and it renews my my willingness to still have a lot of faith in how this world might be and what it might become.
Following her death, 2 volumes of her writings were published. The Winner Names the Age, a collection of writings, and How Am I to Be Heard? Letters of Lillian Smith in 1993.
And I think she's a pivotal player in the social justice movement, at least in terms of her writings and the way in which she articulated the importance of being concerned with civil rights. Those are wonderful ideals that are as important today as they were 50 years ago.
That really kind of became my mission as a teacher, as a professor, and ultimately my research on Lillian Smith enabled me to show others through her life that there were other voices. And this was important for not only for white Southerners to hear and to know, but also for Southerners of other backgrounds and all classes to recognize.
We are on the edge of making official the merger with Piedmont College, and Piedmont College wants this place for what this place is and for what it can be. In other words, he doesn't want to take it and change it into another critter, And it's very much in line with Piedmont College's sensibility because they have a strong mission and a strong emphasis on social justice.
It's a wonderful opportunity for the college. First of all, it's almost rare to find a section of Georgia property that's as close as it is to the college that's relatively undeveloped. And frankly, that is part of the attractiveness to the college, the fact that we can use a big piece of property like that for various activities.
it's very compelling. I mean, it has this sort of intangible quality about it, and you can feel all of the growing up that went on there, and all of the thinking, and both of Lillian Smith and her family, and the girls who went to camp there.
I think there's a great deal of interest in what was done at that camp. It is the basis of the center and of preservation of her work, and it just broadens the way of knowing about her and of being more inclusive, giving artists of all venues, a place to come together.
Lillian Smith used the power of the written word slowly and methodically to enact changes in the hearts and minds of her readers. For her literary contributions and exemplary efforts on behalf of justice and racial harmony, Lillian Eugenia Smith is named a Georgia Woman of Achievement.
She just had an amazing love, I think, for humanity. It was not directed at any particular group. She embraced us all, and I think I think in some way or other the people of Clayton, the people of Rabun County, knew that and understood it, and in some ways they tried to protect her.
I think she's a Georgia woman of achievement. I think she's a woman of achievement even beyond the borders of Georgia, but she loved Georgia, so I think she would be very, very pleased.